My name's Harry, one of the pastors here, and we are very happy that everybody is here as we continue our series called Stand Firm. And today we're talking again about spiritual warfare. This is what this whole series has basically been about. And we've been studying the armor of God. And today's piece of armor is the shield. Okay, now, if you are here and you've been prone or kind of vulnerable to discouragement, to some besetting sin, to persecution, to hardship, not knowing how to handle hardship, all of that stuff, I think today will maybe unlock some of the answers as to why it's happening. Okay, because the word we're going to study and the passage we're going to look at makes it very clear that the shield is a very, very prominent piece of our armor, and it also makes it clear how we are to stand with this shield. Okay, so again, we've been in Ephesians 6. So let's just start with the beginning of the passage, and we'll go through the shield itself. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand firm. Stand, therefore, having fastened on the belt of truth, which Lawrence talked about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and having put on the breastplate of righteousness. I did that one like a couple weeks ago. And then as shoes for your feet, having put on the readiness given by the gospel of peace, which Pastor Mark did last Sunday. And then we get to our verse this week. In all circumstances, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming darts of the evil one. Now, for the first time, we are hearing in this passage one way the enemy is trying to attack us. We're finally seeing some real weaponry that he's using. They're called fiery darts. I don't know why they use the word dart. In actuality, it's not like the little dartboard, you're kind of doing that. No, this is like full-blown bow and arrows, right? Where the arrow has a flammable substance at the end, it's lit, and you've seen all the old movies. They had those 2,000 years ago, and that's what he's firing at us from all directions. And so if you're vulnerable to, like I said, anxiousness, discouragement, maybe it's some besetting sin, deception, any of those things, here's one of the reasons why that could be happening. So first of all, let's talk about what the word means for the shield. So let's go to the next slide. It's a very distinct word. In the Roman army, there were two kinds of shield. One was kind of small and circular, and that was largely used for close-in battle personal warfare. But the other one, this word, thurios, was referring to the big guy that is like 30 inches wide, 4 feet high, and it was meant to basically cover the entire body. One person could basically shield themselves from a full-on frontal attack. Okay? Now, what happens if somebody's shooting from behind or from the side? Or he's surrounded? This is what we keep saying. You cannot do this battle alone. It was not designed for you to be the one and only person in this battle holding up your shield and expecting not to get hit from other strategic parts around you that are exposed. And what the Roman army did is such a good picture of what we are supposed to do. Look at the way they use this shield to form a collective mobile fortress, where each and every soldier is playing a part to make up the whole, and the entire surroundings of the entire unit, whether it be left, right, behind, or on top of, protected. This is the way we're supposed to fight these battles. Together, with one another, side by side, shields up, over top, to the side, and behind. If you're trying to fight this battle by yourself, you're extremely, extremely vulnerable to all kinds of flaming missiles. We'll look at those in a minute. And what I want to encourage you to do today is to rethink, am I fighting this battle by myself? Here's some good ways you might be. Nobody knows you're in the battle. Nobody knows you're struggling. Nobody knows what you're going through. You're living this battle out in isolation. You are ripe for being picked off by the enemy. All he's got to do is send a few soldiers to your flanks or from behind. And those arrows are going to hit their target every time. So is this you? Rethink the way you're fighting this battle. Choose to do it within a community of believers. Okay, we'll look at what that looks like here in a moment. But the most important thing is to realize you're only one part of a much bigger picture. We have to utilize everything God has given us to win this battle together, not individually. All right, the second thing I want to cover before we jump into the verse is, what is faith? So let's look at the definition. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Now, we all should know that verse. It comes straight out of Hebrews 11. It's a great definition, but I don't like the translation. And I've done all kinds of studying on this translation, and instead of me going through the study of it, because that's not the point, I just want to summarize the way I think it should be translated, which is, just ignore that. But here's my translation of that verse. Faith is having so much hope in the substantive nature of God that even in the midst of difficult circumstances, we have conviction to trust and obey. You like that translation better? Yeah, let's go with that one. Trust me, I don't want to go on how I arrived at that, but this is really like the substance of the meaning of the original. Faith is having so much hope in the substantive nature of God. Your hope is not in anything else. It's not hoping you're going to make it through the journey. Your hope should be in the unchanging, omnipotent character of our God and nothing else. And we have so much hope in that even in the face of adversity, even in the face of uncertainty, even in the face of downright persecution, that your hope in this substantive nature of God gives you so much conviction that you know what to do. You keep trusting him, you keep obeying him. And he may tell you to do something crazy, like wait. Or step out and do something. Or make a phone call, or give, or serve, or love, or forgive. Whatever it is, there's a zillion applications of this. But the most important thing is that your understanding of who God is gives you so much hope because you've seen him work so much in the past that whatever you're facing is just another one of those things. And you're not going to disobey him. You're going to keep trusting him like you have all the other times. And you're going to do what he says to do regardless of how crazy it may appear to others. That's the faith we're talking about when he's saying shields up. All right. Let's go to the verse again. Verse 16 of chapter 6. In all circumstances. Now, everybody at Mosaic knows what the Greek word for all means, right? What does it mean? That's right. No ambiguity. It just means all, right? That's the easiest word for us all to know. In all circumstances. That means all circumstances. All circumstances. Whether they be hurtful, difficult, uncertain, volatile, whether they leave us feeling insecure, whether they're great, whether they're encouraging, whether or not they're discouraging, whether they're incredibly painful. And in this case, most of the circumstances are negative. Because why? Because you got the enemy shooting flaming arrows at you is why. So in this case, we're talking especially difficult, arduous, persevering kinds of things, long-suffering circumstances. In all of those, you got to take up the shield of faith. You got to be so convinced of who it is that's supporting you that your hope is not hoping he's going to make you through the circumstance. Your hope is in the substantive nature of our God, so much so that you have so much conviction about trusting him and obeying him in the midst of all of this junk that's happening around you. That shield extinguishes all the flaming arrows of the evil one. There's that word again, right? So the shield can extinguish just a couple of them. You know, it's all of them. All of them. All of them. Now, there's too many arrows to even list out, right? But there does tend to be a lot of commonality in the arrows because, one, is just thinking about my own life, but two, thinking about you all and just all the different times we've talked about all these different kind of arrows. So here's my top 6 lists of flaming arrows. You ready? Number 1 is temptation. Temptation. Now remember, there's only 3 ways to be tempted, 3 types of sin in this world. One is the lust of your flesh, one is the lust of your eyes, and the other one is the boastful pride of life. Every single sin you can commit falls under one of those 3, and that enemy who's got a razor-sharp bullseye with his bow and arrow knows exactly which one you are most vulnerable to. Not only does he know which one you're most vulnerable to, he knows when you're most vulnerable to it, where you're most likely to be vulnerable to it, and he just waits in the high grass like a lion, just waiting patiently until you're most vulnerable. And then it's like he's waiting until you have nobody around, you're completely exposed on 3 of your sides, or you have no faith to believe or trust or obey, and your shield's down. He knows that part. So don't underestimate him. He's much more powerful than who you are in and of yourself, but he's extremely less powerful than Christ in you. And so a lot of it has to do with whether or not we're going to hold up this shield and extinguish this flaming arrow, because the word that means extinguish is the same word that's used to quench, as in don't quench the spirit. So just as we have the ability to suppress God's working in our life by quenching his Holy Spirit, we also have the ability by having this shield and trusting in God. God can use that to extinguish every single arrow. You believe me? I hope so. So, if you're stuck in this one, maybe you fall into the same thing over and over and over and over, and you just get so tired of falling into it that you pretty much just giving in. You're just living with it. Please, don't give up on that. If you've tried 1,000 times, try 1,001. And we're going to look at ways you can keep fighting this battle. And hopefully we'll even practice some here in a few minutes on how to fight this battle according to what the word tells us to do. Here's another one. Fear and anxiousness. Anybody ever afraid or anxious in this world? I told the first service, I don't quite even understand anymore. used to be the world's most anxious kid. I was very anxious as an adult. Still, I can still be anxious at times, but man, Christ has given me such an anchor in my life against this fear and anxiousness. It's like that stuff is nowhere near where it used to be because of Christ in me. And if you're here this morning and you don't know Christ and you just see all the fear and anxiousness in this world, I am pleading with you, consider who this Christ is we've been singing about, who we've been worshiping, who is so much greater than any fear or anxiousness that exists in this world. He'll give you a peace that passes human understanding. And consider his claims and consider calling out to his name, giving your life to him. One thing you should definitely do if you're prone to this fear and anxiousness, avoid the fearmongers. Avoid the people that are intentionally trying to scare you. There's usually a reason behind why they're doing that stuff, right? A lot of times it's for ratings. A lot of times it's for your vote. A lot of times it can be to get your money. Whatever it is, avoid the people that are spreading the fear. Look at this one, discouragement. Man, I'm fully convinced this is like the enemy's number one tactic for leaders. If I could tell you how much time I spend fighting discouragement as a pastor, it's a lot. That's one of the big areas of growth for me as a human being, is just fighting discouragement. We got to learn to do that. There's always something to be discouraged about. And if you're not careful, it'll make you question who you are called to be and what you are called to do. How about this one? Deception. Sometimes we're just vulnerable to deception, where people lie to us. Remember, who's the father of lies? The enemy himself, the evil one, is constantly lying to us about everything. We have to learn to recognize that stuff. How do you recognize lies? By simply knowing the truth. God is truth. Christ is truth. The more you know him, the more you will know and recognize deception. And remember, God says to us as his children, do not be deceived. There's a lot of onus on us not to be deceived. What's another one? What's the next one? Guilt and shame. Boy, do I see that a lot, right? It's like, pack your bags, you're going on a guilt trip. You know who those people are, right? You know who they are. When you pick up the phone, how could you? And I don't know who's doing the call. I'm not even going to try to say, but you know who they are. A lot of times it's the enemy speaking, right? When you hear those tapes in the back of your mind about how worthless you are, about how stupid you are, about how lazy you are, about how whatever, and how dare you, and you're so shame on you, just whatever it is, that is all from the enemy. Lies the enemy loves to play on his children to try to get you to doubt and not trust and disobey who God is. Last one, just difficult trials, persecution, anything that makes you long suffering, anything where you have to endure hardship. This is a hard one. Man, just thinking about all the difficult things we have to endure. How do we stay prayerful and persistent through all those hard times? The enemy loves it. Remember what happened in the book of Job. God allowed Satan to basically try Job for a long period of time, took away everything, including it's starting with his family. So don't be surprised. Never stop praying. Never stop hoping. Never stop trusting God for your family. I don't care where they are, who they are, how far away they are, what they're doing. Keep hoping, trusting, praying. So those are like the 6 flaming arrows that I see. Are you any of you all vulnerable to that, or are you much more mature than I am? Now, the applications, like I said, are infinite. There's a million ways you can trust and obey God. But there's 3 ways specifically mentioned in Scripture that we should all start with. Look at this passage. This is out of 1 Thessalonians 5:16. So it's a substantive hope, hopes, believes, and trusts. How do we act? How do we trust? How do we obey? Look at how Paul ties these 2 passages together. Now remember the word all? Let's look at 1 Thess 5:16. Rejoice how often? Always. What does always mean? Always. Pray how often? Without ceasing. What does without ceasing mean? Always. Here's that word again. Give thanks in how often? All circumstances. You know, that's the only other time Paul uses the word in all circumstances. When you're holding up your shield and when you're supposed to be giving thanksgiving to God. So holding up that shield of faith is the same thing as basically giving thanks to God in the moment of that warfare. Yeah. Can you do that? That's a hard one. A lot of times we have to will ourselves to give thanksgiving to God when we're hurting inside, when we're tired of waiting, when somebody has hurt us, when there's a lot of pain or just long suffering involved. But this is the ultimate mark of maturity for the believer, is that in the midst of all of that, you can say, I hate what's happening. These circumstances are so painful, but I'm still trusting you, and I thank you that you still are God of heaven and earth, that I can still believe and hope that you know what's happening, and that one day this story will be part of my story that shows the power and redemptive nature of Christ. So others will see and will believe because of what you brought me through. So, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. So regardless of what the battle has been like, regardless of what it will be like, you can take to the bank that you should be doing these 3 things all the time, in all circumstances, without ceasing. Always. And so if you look at the next slide, look, I made a little arrow myself out of those words. Faith can fire back at the fiery arrows. Conviction and the trust to obey comes in the forms of us doing what we know for sure we have to do, which is rejoice in who God is, pray without ceasing, being dependent on who God is, giving thanks to God, letting him know you still believe. And you know what that does? Look at the next slide. Turns all those flaming arrows into rubbish. So, can we practice a little bit? How much time we got? Let's just practice a little bit. If you're able, would you just stand up with me and then let's form like that picture we saw of the army. Could we just kind of get close together, kind of like the end of a service? Just grab a hand, touch someone in front of you or behind you. And let's just do a little spiritual warfare practice in this moment. Could you, in this moment, verbalize and articulate, whether or not you feel it or not. Let's just will ourselves to do this. Could you thank God for whatever is the most difficult in your life right now? Let's just hear it come off of our tongues. Usually when that happens, the heart will follow. I can't tell you the number of times I didn't feel like doing it, but when I did, it changed everything. So take a few moments. You don't have to pray out loud, but if you do want to pray out loud, do. And let's just thank God for his faithfulness, his worthiness to be sought and trusted in this. Let's thank him for the story that's not finished. Let's thank him for the story that's yet to be written. Let's thank him for Christ. Let's thank him for peace that passes understanding. Let's thank him for joy that's inexplicable. Let's thank him for hope that goes way beyond what this world offers. Let's thank him for love. Let's thank him for giving us those around us. Let's thank him for the strength to endure.